Welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield. And first and foremost, Josh, happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July. I will say I'm a little tired from the fireworks show last night. But this year, our fireworks show featured like a 15-minute drone show before that was put on by sponsored by one of the local credit unions. It was really, really exceptional, actually. So it was a pretty good 4th of July here. How about you? Did you have a good 4th?
How many drones did they have in the air?
A lot. I mean, enough that like big waving flags and Statue of Liberty with like a flickering torch. There were a lot, and we were not particular, like we were kind of close, but we opted to go for like a little more comfortable park area rather than on the fairgrounds itself. But we could still see it just fine from distance. So they had a lot of drones. It was a very expensive show, I'm sure.
That's cool. I had a nice 4th. I'm in Wisconsin. Shout out to all the Wisconsinites. Shout out to the U.S. Women's Disc Golf Championships happening not too far from here. I'm in Sheboygan. I keep being near the disc golf tournaments. I didn't get here until, of course, after the tournament was over because I was broadcasting for DGN. But I'm here with my family. It's my whole family together for the first time since pre-COVID. We were supposed to all hang out last winter for Christmas time, but then 2 of my brothers got COVID. So we're all here now, and it's been nice. So fireworks got postponed due to rain, but going tonight. They rescheduled them. July 5th fireworks.
Oh, nice.
So
okay.
I'll check back in if there's any drone shows.
All right.
All right. So the U.S. Women's Championships are in the books. Major number 2 for FPO. And Hailey King wins her first career major. In some ways, Josh, it feels like we should have seen it coming. You know, obviously the talent that Hailey has, playing in Wisconsin, her home state, I feel like we didn't talk enough about the chance that she had to win on, at least for Elver, a course that she knew. And I can understand why we didn't. She hasn't looked very good this season, but she looked so sharp the whole week from pretty much every facet of the game. The putting was really strong. She was able to bounce back from mistakes and through the disc great. I mean, had some of the very best shots of the tournament, including a spectacular eagle on hole 17 at Elver.
I mean, she really did. And I think one of the things that was most remarkable to me, and I think plays into this, home course advantage that you've talked about, is the fact of just how relaxed she looked. Especially at major time, Hailey is a young player. Nerves are very much a factor. And we've seen Hailey be kind of tense before. We've seen her where it just doesn't look like she's having a great time out there. And this weekend, I mean, she was just playing disc golf. She was having a good time. And she even said in her post-round interview, I went into the last round as if this was the first round and that there were going to be more later to play. Her entire attitude for the entire weekend was one that I think was built around playing like she was just playing a normal, regular tournament at home. It was a big home field advantage for her, and I think that familiarity of both the course but also the people that were there with her plays a big factor in her ability to just relax and play her best golf, and that does a lot for her. It meant that, as you said, not only did she look incredibly sharp, but it was all around. You could tell the mistakes weren't as big. She took advantage of the high moments. It felt like momentum was always rolling in her favor, and it was just impossible to stop.
Yeah, and I think, so she averaged 986 golf over the course of the weekend, which is easily the best. That's 20 points higher than her next best finish. I'm sorry, if you go all the way back to Las Vegas, she shot 978. So it was a little bit better than her ratings at Vegas. Vegas is a set of courses where it tends to give out high ratings, kind of like what we see at the Memorial, so you kind of got to take that with a grain of salt. But, this was just some of the best disc golf we've seen from her in 2 years, really. I mean, you think back to some of the tournaments she won last year when she won 4 tournaments. And, of course, she won the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship, which isn't a major, but has a similar level of pressure, if not more, than winning, a U.S. Women's Championship. So it's not like she's a stranger to the pressure of a final round of a big tournament. But, I think what impressed me particularly is that it wasn't like she cruised in the final round. I mean, it was close. Like, let's be honest. It was very close. She made some big mistakes, particularly in the front nine, and she opened the door for Owen Scoggins and then an incredible surging Valerie Mandujano to tie it up. There was a three-way tie midway through the round, and it looked like it could go either way. And then that's when Hailey stepped up and just made some really clutch shots, got some huge birdies down the stretch, hit some big putts. And to me, that is the thing that like shows and it may be slow, but it shows the ongoing maturation of Hailey King, right? She is getting better at not falling into the funk. And you could argue that this whole season's been in the funk, but you know what? I'm going to give Hailey King a little bit of credit. She's moved from Wisconsin to North Carolina. She's changed her bag. She had to miss tournaments because of a medical procedure earlier this year. Like, it's expected to me in some ways that you're not going to play your best disc golf straight away. Like, it's stressful to move. It's hard to like get resettled into a new place, hundreds of miles from home. And then to be like changing the bag on top of that, like that's a lot to do. And so after Hailey's had some time to settle in, what happens? Well, she comes out and she looks like the best disc golfer on the planet. And it's not like we haven't seen this before. I mean, this is not a new story for Hailey King. Like, we have seen the talent oozing out of Hailey King for 3 years at least. And so, I feel like we should have seen it coming a little bit more, that she could show up and play like this.
I think one of the tricky things that's going to require us to evaluate Hailey King, at least in the immediate future, right? Of course, Hailey King, as you said, just one of the most talented young players in FPO, if not the most talented young player. I mean, we saw some rounds from her last season that just showed another level of performance from her. The immediate future, though, the rest of this season, maybe next season, and I think one of the tricky parts that we have to evaluate then is Hailey King in her post-round interview said that she plans on playing less events in order to avoid the burnout of previous seasons. I always wonder how you evaluate those kind of players when you don't have the same week in, week out performance, because it's not like you have a large handful of players who are, incredibly talented, who play, certain key events, one's close to home, and then the majors. It's, one, maybe two really critical players per division maintain a schedule like that at this time. And given that that's the case, I think it makes Hailey King a really interesting conundrum for, picking her in the future, because we know how talented she is. But when you have those breaks, is that something that favors her because she has rest and comes back and plays fresh? This one, I think, is a difficult one to evaluate because it was at her home course. How is she going to play at Idlewild next week? I haven't checked if she's registered, so don't mulligan me if she's not. But how
I'm going to mulligan you no matter what. I'm coming with the mulligans.
So it's unfair. She is registered for Idlewild. I have her profile page up on PDGA anyways. So how do you take this weekend, and especially given a limited schedule, use this weekend as a predictor for the rest of her season performance? I think that is one of the most difficult questions about Hailey King that I still have to answer after this weekend.
I don't think there's an easy answer here. We're going to have to wait and see. I feel like last year, I'm actually going to check this, because I feel like last year, it's not like we saw Hailey look amazing every single week. Like, so she won Texas States. And then she was ninth at Jonesboro. And ninth last year, without the Europeans in the field, was not a particularly good result. I mean, it's still a top 10, but, given her ability. And then she came out and won DDO, shooting even better. I mean, she averaged 988 at DDO, was tremendous. And then, was more around the top 5 range for most of the season. She definitely was playing better last year than she's played so far this year. But, obviously to see her go out and shoot the way that she did and look just in control of the discs and the putter the way that she did this weekend has to make you think that, okay, well, she could pop off any week and win. Now, I don't know if there's a specific kind of course that I would say that I think she's going to win on. I mean, we've seen her win in the Woods. We've seen her win in the Open. It's not like I don't think you can pigeonhole her as a certain type of player. But I get your point, and I think evaluating her for things like Player of the Year down the line, not that she's in that conversation yet, but if she wins the second major and maybe a couple of podiums along the way, but only plays 75% of the remaining Pro Tour or Elite Series events, how do you balance that? I think that's a good question to ask, and I think we're going to have to kind of wait and see how it plays out before we make any kind of decisions on that. I think, for her, managing the amount of playing time seems to be important, and how can you argue with that when she comes and she wins a major? If you win the majors and you don't play anything else, okay, you could still be considered the best disc golfer on the planet. And if you have the support of your sponsor in Innova to do that, then power to you. We're going to talk a little bit more about Innova in a moment. So let's take a look at the rest of this podium. Valerie Mandujano ends up finishing in second place after canning a massive birdie putt on 18 to just keep it interesting enough down the stretch. Val had a 7-under stretch of 7 straight holes in the final round to come surging from the chase card back into contention and just comes up short. A couple of missed shots, and you think about what could have been. Of course, a couple of better rounds earlier in the tournament would have helped too. But she ends up finishing in second place. Scoggins taking third. Both of those players getting their first ever podiums at a major. And I will say, Josh, I picked them both to be on the podium, so I'm going to go ahead and just take the victory lap right now as I pick up a couple of points. And so, look, I was so impressed by both players. I mean, obviously, Val, now her 6th podium on the season. She is at the point where I might say that is she the front runner for Player of the Year right now? With Paige finishing 21st this weekend, and I know it sucks. Kristen Tatar's not in the field, but she's not in the field. So you have to take that into account. Mandujano comes in second. She's been all over the podium. She's played more events than Tatar. I'm not saying she's there, but she's getting pretty darn close to being at the top of the list.
Yeah, she definitely is. I think I still give it to Paige.
More wins.
3 Elite Series wins and a major. Yeah, it's don't get me wrong, 29th or 21st in a major, not good. But that other than that, Paige has a impressive collection of wins that she has notched on her bag for this season. That's hard to argue with. I think Valerie, though, like you talked about with Kristen Tatar not being on tour, Valerie has done the work in order to pass Kristen Tatar. Don't get me wrong, Kristen Tatar has the better average finishes, but she's also played less events, and now Valerie has tied her in wins and has tied her in finishes at majors, right? Kristen with second at Champions Cup. Valerie's got the second here. So there's no reason for me why Kristen should get the benefit of the doubt from beating out Valerie. So while I still think Paige is probably the front runner, I do think Valerie is locked in second place for now. That, we've got Kristen. If Kristen wins European Open, though, well,
Yeah.
The
Let's talk
discussion.
then.
This goes
It's
back
wide
to
open.
exactly right. Let's talk then. Yeah. Yes. And that goes exactly back to what we were just talking about, though, is like trying to evaluate things like Player of the Year and predictive and predicting how players are going to perform when you have exceptionally good players who are not playing every event. It makes for dramatic, fresh, and exciting storylines that I think actually benefit the Disc Golf Pro Tour, and as because for entertainment value, right? Because you don't see Kristen week in and week out, when Kristen is in the field, you tune in and you want to watch because you have someone else who's going to challenge and vie for the podium. I think Hailey King could be in that exact same boat where she plays 60% of the Disc Golf Pro Tour Elite Series events, but every time she plays those events in maybe 3 years or so, she is on the podium. And then when Hailey King is in the field, you come to watch because she's taking on those who are doing it week in and week out, who are typically your dominant ones, Paige, Valerie, Katrina, and it adds drama and new, fresh storylines that you don't get week in and week out. And that, for entertainment value, we talked a lot about how it's the Disc Golf Pro Tour needs these players because that is their product and they need entertainment value. I am beginning to think that having players like this, Chris Dickerson and even Eagle McMahon to an extent, is good for the Disc Golf Pro Tour for their entertainment value.
That it's good to have people sit out sometimes.
Yeah. Really good, though. Like, they got to be really good players.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like Chris Dickerson's coming back this week for the Preserve. That's going to be a big storyline. And so it's an interesting point. Kind of a big brain thing. Good to have great players not playing sometimes. I think...
Hey, Charlie, quick mulligan. Chris Dickerson is not coming back this week for the Preserve. He's coming back this week for Idlewild.
Oh, I said the wrong tournament. Does that count as a mulligan?
Yeah,
I feel like that's just a misspeak. That's just a misspeak.
Look.
He's coming at me, folks.
After I gave myself an explicit caveat, you told me you were going to mulligan me every chance you got. So.
Well, anyway, obviously Owen Scoggins showing us, I think we saw what we kind of expected to see from both Val and Owen. Owen, putting was unbelievable at times. Didn't have it in the final round, really. She didn't make a circle 2 putt, and it could have been the difference. Val showing us kind of all-around game that she has, and they both made it incredibly interesting as Hailey, left the door open. Maria Oliva led this tournament through 2 rounds, ends up finishing in 4th, tied with Katrina Allen. Katrina Allen, another top 5 finish at a major. She only missed a top 5, I think, twice or 3 times ever at a major. And so, she was back up there, never really in contention for the win, but Maria Oliva certainly was. And then just kind of a bad stretch of about over the back half of the 3rd round and the first few holes of round 4. And that was enough to take her out of the mix. She played amazing the rest of the week. So he had some huge putts, looked fantastic throwing the disc off the tee for much of the tournament, and just got caught in a bad stretch. And I think that's the difference between, Hailey's weekend and Maria's weekend. In fact, they looked similar a lot of the time. They were both throwing it great. They were hitting long putts, but Hailey didn't have the big ice cold stretch, and Maria did. And so, I think Oliva's continuing to show you, though, that she's got the tools to go and win an Elite Series event. Like, it'll probably happen at some point when she just doesn't have the cold stretch, because she has all the talent to be that player.
Well, and the other important point about that is that it's not even about not having a cold stretch. It's about minimizing the effect of that cold stretch. Hailey King's cold stretch through the front 9 of round 4 ends up being 1 under par, with 3 bogeys on that stretch. Maria's cold stretch, let's just even look at round 3, not even moving that into round 4. She is through the back 9, 3 over par with 2 double bogeys. You turn those into single bogeys, you card a birdie here or there and just kind of minimize that damage. And Maria is just as much in contention as anybody else. Only losing by 5 strokes, you turn those into single bogeys, and her round 4 could look very different in the way that she approaches it, just because she's a little bit closer. So I completely agree. I mean, I think Maria has the tools, like you said. It's just about more experience and trying to minimize the damage when you get into a funk, because I think especially at 4 and 5 round tournaments, it's not about not having a funk. It's about minimizing that stretch and the damage that it does to your round.
Everyone's going to have a stretch of holes where they don't play their best.
Yeah.
You can't just birdie every single hole, right? Like, we watched Val Mandujano hit 7 straight birdies and then heat check from like 75 feet, blow it way past, miss the comebacker, and take a bogey. And like, I wonder if she wants that one back, where it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't have thrown the heat check. So it's just, you're totally right. Like, it's about not letting it snowball. And unfortunately for Maria, she made a couple mistakes in the back end of round 3 and let it snowball and made worse mistakes that ended up costing her too many strokes. Speaking of mistakes, it's disappointing to have to talk about this again, but Eveliina Salonen, finishing in 6th place, led the tournament in Circle 1 in regulation, led the tournament in fairway hits. I mean, just what a pleasure to watch Eveliina throw the disc off the tee. It's just so enjoyable. She snaps the disc so hard, throws it so well, and she was playing great all-around disc golf for 3 rounds. And the putter just abandoned her in round 4. And I don't think it helped that she missed a very short putt on 18 at the end of round 3 and then stood over the final putt that she ultimately made barely. But I think that moment stuck in her head because she went on to miss 14 Circle 1 putts in the final round. 14. I mean, it was hard to watch. Multiple 3 putts, and look, I mean, she was there. She was right there. She finished 7 shots back of Hailey King. If she only misses 7 Circle 1 putts, also not good, she would have gone to a playoff with Hailey King. And like, I know that's a little reductive, but like, what's frustrating about this weekend for Eveliina, it's not like it was an all 4 rounds. The putter was just not there. Same story as we've seen all season. No, like she through the first 2 rounds, her putter was a plus. It was a plus, and it was like it was good enough in round 3 when she was hitting her comebackers, and then boom, it was gone in round 4, and it's just so hard to watch because you know what's possible if she could just be solid in that final round with the putter, just solid, but 14 misses and lose by 7 strokes. Very, very difficult for Eveliina, and it's not a solved problem yet, but it does look like she's making progress.
I wonder if part of it, if having somebody who can help, like on the bag, who could help break her out. I don't know if she has a caddy this weekend, but imagine a world where, in Finland, for example, she gets to have a close friend, another disc golf teammate or just companion that she can help to kind of break out of the focus on the putting, especially because if she, speaking of somebody who needs to learn how to control their lows and their slumps, she has to find a way that a miss is not a blow up. And I don't know if that looks like, changing her putt a little bit to, well, I mean, we've talked about this before. I don't want to beat the horse. Eveliina needs to find a way to not snowball. And that is the big point, because she is making strides in the right direction. If she misses a short putt, she needs to be able to shake it off.
Last note here on FPO for now. We're going to buy the numbers segment coming up, and we're also going to talk about the courses as well as Innova and what a great weekend it was for Innova in a little bit. But Paige Pierce finishes 21st. Really just didn't have anything going this weekend. Not her usual self off the tee, not her usual self on the green. This is her worst finish at a major ever. What the heck happened to Paige?
You know, I don't remember who it is. I don't have the email up, so I'm going to apologize for whoever I'm not giving credit to. But we had the listener during a mini mailbag. We talked about, is Paige going to struggle at the major because of how many things she has going on during that week? And I really think that has to be part of it. I mean, she had a busy week going in. She did the Jomez commentary, and there were a lot of factors. And you combine that with a course that doesn't reward her outright distance. I still truly believe that Paige has advantages on these courses because of her ability to throw slower discs. But I mean, like you said, she didn't have it. I don't really know what to take of it, right? It's not just like she wasn't in contention. It's that she was very out of contention the entire tournament. Wasn't even close ever. And I don't really have a lot to pull from that. I think that Paige is still having an exceptional season. If her back half mirrors the front half, we're going to talk about another legendary season for Paige with 8 wins, including 2 majors, if it mirrors perfectly the front half. And so I guess you have an off weekend, and it's more of an off weekend than I expect from Paige Pierce, but I don't really have much more to read into that.
What's weird is that it comes off of tournament where she just looks so fantastic. Yeah. But I think the technicality of the courses and the requirement that the putt be the thing, it didn't play in her favor. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Also want to give a quick shout out to the winners from the other divisions, because this, of course, is a huge major for the pros and the AMs. Biggest ever U.S. Women's Disc Golf Championship in Pro Masters 40 plus. Jen Allen wins by 10 strokes, takes down $3,100. I meant to mention Hailey King won $7,000 for winning in FPO. We'll talk about the purse in our Purse Watch segment coming up. So Jen Allen wins in Masters 40 plus, just dominant as usual in that division. Barrett White wins Masters 50 plus. Peggy Berry wins in 55 plus. Pam Reinecke, Pamaflage is her name in the PDGA page, wins by 15 strokes in 60 plus. Sandy Gast, 65. Jenny Darling in 70. And now we get into the AM divisions. Shout out to Ultiworld Disc Golf subscriber and Upshot listener Emily Yale for her 3-shot win over Virginia Polkinghome in FA1. And Emily Yale is 851 rated, had all 4 rounds over 900, including a 941 rated round 3. So congratulations to Emily for the win in FA1. In Masters 40 plus AMs, Kim Keen wins. Aaron Fitzpatrick in 50 plus. Barb Blow, which what an incredible name. Barb Blow wins in 55 plus. Janice Jones in 60 plus. Patricia Neprid-Mells in 65 plus. Patty Adams in 70 plus. And then we get into the intermediate division. Katie Cheshire, I don't know if I'm getting that one right. I apologize, Katie, but gets a 1-stroke win over Emma Refuse. And Rec, Jillian Geiger. In novice, Caitlin Borgwart. And then the juniors divisions, junior under 15, Therese Cuevas, and juniors under 10, Athena Cuevas. Okay, we got another set of young siblings to pay attention to, folks. The Cuevas sisters, I'm assuming they're sisters, coming up and winning the junior under 15 and under 10 divisions. So congrats to all of the winners at U.S. Women's. When we come back, we're talking about the courses. How did they play? What do we think of them? A lot of people skeptical about them before the tournament. We're also going to talk about Innova. We're going to look at the Purse Watch and a By the Numbers segment. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Head over to Pound Disc Golf's Facebook page to get all the latest information. The Rufus is in production. That's right. So 10 prototypes deep. Now the Rufus is getting made and pre-orders are going to be available very soon. You can find out more and get the latest and greatest at facebook.com/pounddiscgolf. Welcome back to the Upshot. So, a lot of talk about these courses, both before the event and during, and now we talk about it after. Token Creek and Elver Park played host to FPO at the U.S. Women's Championships, and they were both under 6,600 feet. They were kind of courses that the locals play, that are like friendly to lower level players, let's be honest. Did it work? Hailey King wins the tournament 30 under. We don't see those kinds of scores winning FPO tournaments very often, Josh. Did you like these courses for the FPO field?
Yeah, for the most part, actually. And I was one who was pretty skeptical going into this tournament about those courses. Saw the distance, and I was just not convinced that this was going to play super well for them. I think I still had flashbacks of the previous year's courses that were wholly unqualified to host this tournament and did not look good. These courses looked good. I think they offered a nice variety. I think they, blended the more open park style with the more technical wooded. I appreciate that, and I like that. And you're right that 30 under is unusual for FPO. For a 4-round tournament, though, that's not wholly unusual for MPO, though.
Not at all.
Right. And
if anything, it's a little on the low side.
Right. Yes. And so I think of this as there are two thoughts that go into this. The first one is that FPO are so used to playing courses that are modified MPO courses that whenever they play a course that is not a modified MPO course, that is shorter in distance, to them, it's, this is not an FPO course. And I think that's where a lot of people's assumptions were coming into this tournament because, you compare it with what they've been playing and you think, this isn't designed for FPO. In fact, maybe this is exactly where the courses for FPO should be right now in this day and age. Hailey King, it's clear that the distance and the distance throwers didn't have necessarily an advantage, but Hailey King got an eagle, right? There were holes that rewarded you for being able to throw really far. And it's okay that a set of courses doesn't always reward distance, and it's not always LVC or OTB or Portland. And so I think that that's okay. And the second thought that I had, and what I think kind of goes into this, is I think back the discussion around these courses is largely, I think, the discussions around the Worlds courses, that they were shorter than your typical courses, that they, and I mean for MPO in particular, for Worlds, that they aren't necessarily what the MPO side are used to playing, but all in all, I think deliver the kind of technicality and mix of both distance as well as rewarding just consistent and good disc golf and pushing top players to the top, that I really don't see these courses as being a problem. And in fact, I really enjoyed watching them. So at least from the viewership standpoint, I thought that they were really exciting to see the kind of birdie and just edge of circle chances and more birdies from the FPO side than we're typically used to seeing. All in all, I was impressed. I really was.
I think that frankly, we need more of this. We need more of this for FPO. These were courses that were tuned to be very scoreable for a 950 rated player. Well, that's the FPO field. Right?
Yep.
I understand. So Paige is complaining about the courses. I heard Katrina complain about the courses. And yes, let's be honest. They were simple. The courses were fairly simple. There wasn't a lot of really super intriguing holes. There's a lot of holes where you just throw to the green and then you try to make the putt. Yes, 100%. But there were technical shot making skills required. We saw a variety of shot making. We saw people going backhand. We saw people going forehand. We saw a lot of putting on display. And it was scoring, right? It wasn't boring to watch because it wasn't like the only people getting birdie were Ella Hansen, Paige, and Kat, and Natalie Ryan, right? Like, I get it. Like, those players also deserve to have advantages at times, but we don't need that every week. It's boring to watch the super long courses every week. I'm sorry. I've been saying it in MPO too. It's true. It's not that interesting. There's more to disc golf than being able to throw it really far. There is. And I think we saw that on display this weekend. You had to have a good all-around game. You had to be able to be a good putter. Let me give you a stat, okay? I'm stealing something from the By the Number segment because I think it's important in this conversation right now.
Okay.
This last week at Preserve, when you look at the strokes gained metrics, Paige Pierce won with 22 strokes gained from tee to green and 4 strokes gained putting. Okay? Putting was basically not relevant. The way to win at Preserve is to throw it far, and Paige won. What a surprise. Okay? Now, I'm not knocking the Preserve. I think the course is a good one. I like it. But you look at this weekend. Hailey wins with strokes gained tee to green over 4 rounds of 18.5 and strokes gained putting of 11. That's one of the, if you do the ratio of tee to green to putting, that's going to be one of the lowest ratios of the year because putting mattered a lot relative to a lot of other tournaments. As it should. Like, this is what we want to see out of disc golf. We want to see technical shot making sometimes. Now, we don't need to have these super short courses every week. I think there's a case to be made that, you know, if you're going to have this on 2 courses, that one of the courses should be more of a driving type course like what we see at Worlds. But, like, this is actually very compelling disc golf. I saw a lot of people online say that these are the kinds of courses they need to play all the time. That this is the best, FPO disc golf that they've watched. A lot of people, I think, to be honest, probably tuned into FPO and really watched for the first time maybe ever, or at least all season. Because normally they watch MPO and they either skip FPO or they barely pay attention to it. And they watch this weekend and they're like, wow, this is really compelling. Well, to be fair, it's compelling most of the time. But I think I'm glad people were able to tune in and watch the technical shot making. It is cool to watch people carve lines through the woods. It's a lot more exciting than watching the 4 really strong distance throwers bomb it 100 feet further than everybody else. I mean, yeah, credit to them. They can throw it super far. It's awesome. But, like, that's not the only skill we should be testing in FPO. And this, to me, just shows me how many courses still are just built for MPO, and then they, tack on an FPO T-pad. It's brutal. It's brutal. And the Pro Tour can tell me all they want that they're paying attention to this, but they're not. Not enough. Like, this has to be a lesson weekend for the Pro Tour and the other people who are designing courses for FPO, because we just have way too many weeks where the course is just not tuned well enough to the overall division. Like, designing every course to be only winnable by Kristen Tatar and Paige Pierce is not interesting. It's not fun. This was fun. Simple as that.
Well, and the big thing that we've talked about that I want to highlight again and again is it's not good enough if you have a 400-foot, or better yet, let's say you have a 650-foot par 4 for MPO, and then you cut 200 feet off on the front end and move the tee pad 200 feet closer. That does not necessarily make a compelling hole, because let's say it's a dog leg, the MPO landing zone, because of where it is based on, just placement for the next shot. For FPO, that first shot is just completely irrelevant. It's shortening holes does not necessarily make a good FPO hole. In fact, oftentimes I'd argue that it doesn't. It means that lots of holes have zero scoring separation because both sets of shots, or even the single shot. The first, if it's a par 3, it means that they can get there, they can get 90% of the way to circle 2. So they're just outside circle 2 in regulation, or just far. A lot of people are hitting the edge of circle 2 in regulation, and then they're just doing little upshots that have no danger and are just a piece of cake, and then everyone's taking par. Or on par 4s, it means that one of the shots is just wholly uninteresting because it doesn't have the necessary landing zones built in for an FPO style of game. And this course did. I mean, when you watched where some of the landing zones were being shot for, and for own, there was commentary. Excellent job on the call again, Charlie. Pleasure as always to listen to you.
Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome. But on the call, you'd highlight the fact that own is going to struggle to get to the landing zone on the par 4, whereas the distance throwers are going to be able to hit the landing zone. But it wasn't just, Hailey was able to hit the landing zone. Maria, I've just named 2 far throwers. Valerie is able to hit the landing zone. Hailey's able to push for a little bit extra, and Own has to make sure she works for that landing zone. That's good golf. That's
right.
That is rewarding appropriately distance on a course that doesn't just depend on distance. That's what I want to hear more from FPO. I will say, I was incredibly skeptical. I was so ready to come into this show today and just blast the PDGA for repeating the same mistakes. And man, was I not having a lot of faith after the caddy book incident. But shout out to the courses. Shout out to the
caddy book did not appropriately
set up incredibly well. No, caddy books still suck. I'm not taking that back. I don't feel bad about that. But the courses were exceptional, and they were impressive. My only qualm, I have one small qualm. I wish that hole 18 at Elver had some sort of danger.
Terrible finishing hole. Awful finishing hole.
Terrible finishing hole.
Maybe the worst on tour this season. It lacked drama. It sucked.
Yes. I want pretty tight OB in a straight tunnel that you can easily putter, par, or you can go real big for the birdie, but you have a drop zone that makes saving your par if you miss OB punishing. That's what we needed, because by the time we got to hole 18, I was like, this is over, right? Hailey was not, you can't mess that shot up bad enough to lose that tournament at that point.
And frankly,
so
her drive was not good, Josh. Her drive wasn't good, and then
no, it wasn't.
But it was still just a little jump putt. There's no way to not get a 3.
Hole 18. So real quick, just one of the hard things, and Charlie, we were chatting about this. UDisc needs course stats that better account for the discrepancies in the field. Because in the FPO field this weekend, we had 89 players, I believe it was, including a 700 rated player. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine, right? Who come play? It's the U.S. Women's Championship. It's designed to be inclusive and bring everyone. So I'm not saying don't have these players play. The problem is, though, when your stats are course stats specifically are taking into account the player who shot 46 over par, as well as the player who shot 30 under par, your course statistics are wholly useless. I mean, there's nothing useful that can be derived from the course statistics, which means, you and I are sitting here talking about it, and it has to be done, largely anecdotally, by observation, by what we saw, and we don't have that kind of, here are what the stats are showing in order to back that up, and that makes it difficult. But 12. So out of the 89-person field on day 4 at Elver, there were 3 birdies, 11 bogeys, and 1 double bogey. The rest were pars. Terrible finishing.
0
hole.
Scoring separation.
Cannot make a worse finishing hole, in my opinion. That truly is the worst finishing hole I have seen in a very long time. Yeah. Only complaint, only gripe with the courses. Other than that, great.
But
great,
it's a
great
legitimate.
weekend.
It's a legitimate complaint. It's a very legitimate complaint when you want to have some ability for someone to make up a stroke on the final hole, and it's more or less impossible. I mean, obviously we saw Valerie Mandujano hit the putt, and that was that salvaged that hole sort of, but not enough, because it's like there's no way Hailey's going to bogey. Like, she'd have to do a horrible shank to bogey this hole. I mean, I saw somebody complaining online. They were like, the commentators shouldn't make it sound like it's over before it's over. And it's like, well, like, we got to be realistic. Like, I think I said on the broadcast, no one outside of the top 50 has bogeyed this hole. Or, sorry, nobody inside the top 50 has bogeyed this hole. And like, like, you have to, that just has to be, like, that's just a fact. Like, Hailey would have to make a catastrophic mistake to lose the tournament at this point. And it's too bad, because I think all you have to do is tuck some OB in there, and then you've got a pretty good hole.
Yep.
So anyway, let's talk about the fact that we had first of all, we had the same lead card for rounds 2, 3, and 4. That's pretty rare. It doesn't really happen very often. Certainly, it's never happened at a tournament of this size, because this is basically one of the biggest FPO fields in the history of the sport at a major. So not only was it the same lead card, but all 4 players on the card sponsored by Innova. So what do you make of that, Josh?
A couple of things. Number one, I make of it that these players, Innova did not have the catastrophic offseason in FPO that we were a part of, lamenting. We had Kona leave. You had Valerie Mandujano leave, which in hindsight, it sucks that Valerie left. Like, that was a great grab for dynamic discs. But yeah, kind of reminds me in sports when in order to acquire a star player, you have to take like someone on their roster who's got a bad contract that they don't want, so they send them both over, and you kind of have to take them as a package deal. Turns out the package deal was flipped in this case, but that's what it feels like now. Like, if we had seen in the future, it's like, okay, you can have Valerie, but you got to take Kona with you. Got
to offload this contract,
right? You've got to like Valerie for dynamic discs. Obviously, it's great signing and a loss for Innova, but Innova's off season wasn't as bad for FPO, especially MPO as well, but FPO especially, as I think it was made out to be. I also think, though, that Innova has some young players who are still developing. See Oliva and Hailey. And also you had some Innova has players that we know are going to benefit from this style of course. See Own, right? It was a perfect storm to really put Innova on the top. Do I think Innova has the outright best FPO team? I'm a little hard pressed to say that right now.
Who do you put ahead of them?
But I think
have to have
Innova
the best
is definitely
team, don't you think?
Not just an afterthought. You think Innova does?
Well, who's going to be ahead of them? I mean, you could argue for Discraft because they have Paige and Missy, but I think the depth that Innova has
Paige and Missy,
is still superior.
I mean, maybe, but like even in the top 10 in the Disc Golf Pro Tour standings, you got Maria Oliva and Kat Merch at 8 and 9. And like, that's it. I think you need, and Hailey King can be this person. Hailey King can be, and Own, sorry. Yep, you got Own as well. Hailey King can be the flag bearer for Innova, but she hasn't been this season. And I'm sorry, like, Discraft's got 2 players in the top 4. You've got DGA, which is kind of with Discraft up there as well. Valerie Mandujano is with Trilogy, and so Dynamic Discs. Kristen Tatar, Latitude 64. Like, yeah, I mean, you're right. And Innova's got the most depth. You Own in top 5 maybe salvages it. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think the difference at the top, it's pretty balanced right now. Latitude has Kristen, Discraft has Paige, Innova has Hailey. Like, you have the top kind of star level players across these different teams, Katrina with DGA. But Innova has so many good players down the roster that other teams just really don't have as much. And that means that when those players have a good weekend, boom, you get something like this where it's just all Innova at an Innova-sponsored tournament. It looks pretty good. And I mean, Innova's always had the biggest team.
Great.
They've always had the biggest team, but I think this shows me that it's like, okay, like they have a real future. I mean, if they can keep Eveliina and they can keep Henna and they can keep Hailey, like, you know, Owen is not probably going to be able to continue to compete at the highest level for that many more years. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I mean, she's already obviously Masters eligible and she just about won this tournament. But it does take a certain type of course. Like at the end of the day, this disfavored distance throwers to some extent, and there were not that many holes where Owen truly couldn't reach it. And on certain courses, there's a lot of holes where she just cannot get a birdie. So, you know, anyway, I think it's just a really nice weekend for Innova. It's as simple as that. And for them to have the spotlight all weekend long.
It's also compounded by, without a doubt. And I think it's also compounded by a final round interview from Hailey King that has to make Innova very, very pleased. So Hailey King goes in, says, and talks about how in the previous years, she did not feel supported by her sponsors. And it really made her feel like she was, I don't know if she said the word sponsors in particular. I think she said like the people who are supposed to have her back never really felt like they were there. And that she was feeling burnt out and not supported in trying to do and accomplish what she saw as her disc golf career. And she has just been overwhelmingly grateful then to Innova for everything that they've enabled and that this weekend would not have been possible without her or without them and facilitating her to take a little bit of time off and to play less events. And that kind of was the plan, and just how fortunate and grateful she was to have Innova. Even if Innova has players at the top, I think that this is a huge win for Innova coming off of the wake of Innova doesn't pay its players. Innova doesn't take care of its top players. And so for Hailey King to come out, win a major, and then talk about how good Innova is to her since moving over, I think that helps kind of chip away at that image that other pros have built. And Innova has to be just very, very pleased with everything that happened this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of bad press for Innova and the FPO side of things for a few years. You know, Val Jenkins leaves saying she's not being treated as a world champion that she is. You know, they lose Kona and Val in the off season, and it's like, what are they doing? And then they sign Hailey, and you're like, okay, well, like that definitely helps. And then to have her say this and kind of like definitely throw shade at Discraft. Let's be honest. I mean, that was not that she didn't say the word Discraft, but like we don't need to, you know, read too far between the lines to see what she was trying to say there. And you know, I in some ways I find it a little surprising because I think that the top players on Discraft have been pretty outspoken about how well they think they're being treated. But think about it from Hailey's perspective. Maybe she's looking at Paige Pierce making all this money, and she's like, I deserve that. And maybe she does, and maybe she doesn't. Like that's for you to decide, and that's for the market to decide. But she made her choice, and certainly didn't seem happy with the way things ended at Discraft. So it doesn't seem like a lot of love lost there at this point. Certainly interesting. That brings us to our By the Numbers segment. We're going to just go through some quick hit little numbers from the weekend. Just really want to shout out Sai Ananda first and foremost. It's her third straight top 10 finish at a major, and she did that in part through having 66 straight holes of bogey-free disc golf. That's the longest streak of the season, FPO or MPO. Couldn't quite hold it together to go a full 72 holes bogey-free, but a really nice performance again from Ananda, who's continues to not really be in the mix for the win, but certainly be in the conversation at the majors the last three tournaments.
Maria Oliva, round 2, shoots a 12 under 10-18 round, highest rated round of the tournament. and the highest of Maria's career. An excellent weekend overall, but just shooting around like that just has to be really exciting for her. It also means, though, that Charlie wins the over-under. I had a bad weekend for both picks and over-under. If Maria would have just shot one more birdie, I would have won.
The line was 12.5, folks. 12.5.
I knew I should have taken the under. I was kicking myself after that show. So close, but
it was very
shout
close.
out to Maria shooting the hot round of the weekend.
In 2021, 5,500 people tuned in for the U.S. Women's Championship. Now, I don't know if that was the final round. This is coming from Mahmoud Barani, the producer over at DGN, who tweeted this out. 5,500 people. Now, remember, Paige Pierce won a blowout last year. But I don't think there's any way around this being an incredibly impressive number. 2022 viewership, 12,760. Now, this is definitely a big step down from the top MPO events, but still more than double last year's viewership. And people tuned in, in a week where there was no MPO action to watch. This was an opportunity. It was a holiday weekend, which maybe that played a role, but either way, the action was exciting all weekend long. It really was. And people showed up and tuned in for it.
I think the fact it happened on a holiday weekend is actually more exciting because 4th of July is not known for sit in your house and watch sports. There are a lot of holidays where that's the case. See Thanksgiving, for example. But it is not the case for 4th of July. You're out camping. You're out doing things. You're boating. You're with your family. So for that many people still to tune in on the holiday weekend, I actually think is really, really impressive.
Great point.
16-year-old Aria Castorita shoots a 22 under and finishes inside the top 10. We've talked about Aria before. I forget she's 16. That is just so
She
crazy.
won the junior under 15 division last year. Junior champion under 15, and now she's in the top 10 at an FPO major. Scary talent.
She's going to be good for a long time.
It's another tough weekend for Kona Panis. She's second to last in strokes gained putting. Lost nearly 12 strokes on the green this weekend. Finishes well outside of the cash. And it continues to be a very difficult season for Kona. I mean, there's just no way around it.
Charlie, I think we've got a purse watch now, right?
We do. It's going to bring us a purse watch right now. Let's talk about U.S. Women's Purse Watch. And so here are the numbers. Total payout, $56,145, over $35,000 in added cash. The FPO winner payout, $7,000. That's the second highest payout of the season behind the Champions Cup, where it was $8,000. Last year's purse was $43,921. So that's over 25% growth and from purse from last year to this year. And look, remember, this is a 90-person total field. The $35,000 added cash number compares pretty favorably to a lot of tournaments from this season. Like, it's a little bit less than some of the top Pro Tour events, but not substantially so. And again, that's for a field that's about half the size of a typical DGPT event with both MPO and FPO. So the purse growth continues, and $7,000. You'd like to see it be a little higher, I think. I'd like to see it get up into that $10,000 range for FPO at the majors, but we're definitely making steps forward here.
Yeah, and all in all, I just have to say, I think that from last year to this year, significant improvements. I mean, last year, we at this point were outraged at the lack of care, investment, and effort that went into the U.S. Women's Disc Golf Championship, from everything from courses to presentation to coverage to the payouts. And I think just this weekend was a marked improvement. It was a successful and incredibly well-run tournament. It was exciting to watch, and from everything I saw, I think is a incredible step in the right direction. So shout out to the PDGA for their work on this. Shout out to the tournament staff for what I think was an excellent job here. Shout out to the players. I think it was an excellent tournament to watch. All in all, what a weekend. And that's just a holistic, amazing weekend of disc golf.
Congratulations again to Hailey King for her first major championship, and she does it in her home state of Wisconsin. That is going to do it for today's edition of The Upshot. We look forward to talking about Idlewild, which is coming up this weekend on the Disc Golf Pro Tour before the pros head over to Europe for the European Open and the European Swing. That'll be back on Thursday. For Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you then right here on The Upshot.